Hi, I'm Sam Harrelson, and my paper is titled Attention as Ecological Practice, AI Data Centers and the Limits of the Anthropocene, a Crisis of Ecological Perception in Spartanburg County, South Carolina. There's a building going up here in Spartanburg right now on the site of an old Kohler factory that employed hundreds of people for 66 years before closing. A company called Northmark is turning it into what they have called one of the most advanced high performance computing facilities in the world. The investment is $2.8 billion. dollars. The jobs it will create, it's about 2 dozen. Just a few miles away, along Highway 290 near the Tiger River, a different company tried to do something similar. The company is named Tiger DC, and they called their project Project Sparrow, after South Carolina's motto, Film Sparrow Sparrow. While I breathe, I hope. They proposed a $3 billion AI data center, and then something unusual happened. The community showed up. Hundreds of people packed county council chambers. A few Facebook groups started, and a major Facebook group hit around 3,000 members. A petition collected 4,000 signatures. And eventually, Tiger DC withdrew their project. That's where my paper begins, not with a data center, but with a community that noticed one. My paper argues that AI data centers are not just an energy problem or a water problem, though they are both of those things. They're also a crisis of ecological perception. They are infrastructure designed almost deliberately to be invisible. And that invisibility is doing political work. Richardson and colleagues' 2023 update to the Planetary Boundaries framework found 6 of 9 limits already transgressed: climate, freshwater, biosphere integrity, land systems, novel entities, biogeochemical flows. And what I'm arguing in my paper is that data center expansion presses against at least 3 of those simultaneously, and does so while the promotional machinery around these projects already trains communities not to notice. That's the thread that connects my local Spartanburg case to the course frameworks we've been working with all semester, from Gauche's Crisis of Imagination to Wainwright and Mann's Climate Leviathan to Francis's Technocratic Paradigm, Haraway's Contact Zones, and Klein's work on noticing. The problem isn't just structural, it's perceptual. Here's what the promotional materials don't say from Project Sparrow. Lawrence Berkeley's National Laboratory projects that US data center electricity demand could reach 325 to 580 terawatt hours by 2028, a potential tripling of our current demand on the grid, almost driven entirely by AI. A single large scale facility can draw hundreds of megawatts continuously around the clock. And that's just electricity. Water is the hidden variable. David Mitten's 2021 analysis shows that most industry disclosures only report direct water usage, the cooling towers that you can see. They obscure the substantially larger withdrawals embedded in the electricity generation that powers a facility. Tiger DC's materials emphasized a closed loop cooling design, as do many AI data center proposals, with negligible water impact. That framing doesn't account for what the grid draws from the Broad River Basin here to produce the power that they're buying. Kay Crawford in Atlas of AI puts it plainly: these systems are not virtual, they're not in the cloud. They are among the most materially intensive forms of infrastructure now being built at scale. That immateriality is a story that we tell, and it's a story that serves a specific interest. In Laudate Diem, Pope Francis names what he calls a technocratic paradigm, a way of thinking that treats reality as a raw material for human projects, that renders the rest of creation as a background rather than a companion. He writes that we have stopped seeing other creatures as companions along the way. That's not just a moral claim, it's a perceptual one. He's describing a trained way of not seeing. Donna Haraway, who was cited in a footnote of Laudate Deum, which apparently surprised her considerably, appreciates Francis's diagnosis but sharpens it. The problem isn't something in human nature. It's technocratic paradigm capitalism. Specific, historically situated formations of capital and nation and corporate power that have organized the exploitation of both human and non-human life for profit. The data center bailout isn't just the expression of a universal human drive towards technology at all. It's the expression of a very particular political economy, tax incentive structures, utility regulatory frameworks, state economic development strategies that measure success in investment dollars while externalizing cost onto communities and watersheds that don't have a seat at the table. What Francis and Haraway share is this. They both insist that the crisis requires a transformation of perception before it can be addressed at the level of policy. Francis calls this a spiritual awakening. Haraway calls this staying with the trouble, remaining present to a damaged world, refusing the consolations of techno-optimism. Both of them are saying that you have to be able to see it before you can act on it. And the data center, as I argue in my paper, is infrastructure organized around the systemic prevention and the systematic prevention of exactly that type of seeing. At the February 2026 County Council meeting here in Spartanburg County, a council member named Paul Abbott, one of the two who initially voted against Project Sparrow, said this: "I'm not an electrician and I don't understand the grid, but I do understand when the power goes off." That's a perceptual claim. Abbott was describing the moment when the infrastructure broke through. Duke Energy noticed during an ice storm urging us customers to conserve power, for example. The grid suddenly had weight. The data center's demand suddenly existed in the same world as his thermostat. Eve's Clinton account of ecology of attention helps us understand why that moment was kind of unusual. For Sitton, attention is not a neutral cognitive capacity. It's a distributed field, shaped and organized by the infrastructures, media systems, and political economies within which it operates. The promotional apparatus around Project Sparrow organized what Spartanburg residents were capable of seeing. The jobs were visible, but the Tiger River watershed was not. Maurice Merleau-Ponty, whose account of embodied perception runs through so much of my own work, helps explain why this matters at a deeper level. For Merleau-Ponty, perception is not just a mental act performed on a world of objects. It's a bodily engagement with the field of significance, a way of being already in the world, already implicated in its textures and contours. What we are habituated to notice shapes what we are capable of caring about and even protecting. The data center reorganizes that perceptual field by design. The question isn't whether Spartanburg should have data centers. The question is, what would it mean to take that decision within ecological limits rather than beyond them? With planetary cost visible before the vote rather than buried in technical appendices that no one reads. In my paper, I propose 4 criteria. Number 1, full energy transparency. Any large-scale facility should account for load demands across its operational lifetime, including upstream fossil fuel generation. Number 2, water budgeting at the watershed level, not the facility level, because the freshwater planetary boundary is defined at the watershed scale, and evaluating each project in isolation systematically underestimates cumulative pressure on the Broad River Basin, here, for example. Number 3, distributional impact assessments. Who actually pays the grid upgrade costs? Who lives adjacent to the transmission corridors? And number four, authentic and genuine community consent, not advisory engagement, but binding authority over approval conditions. And I don't mean these as a regulatory framework. They're the minimum that attention as an ecological practice would require. The institutional translation of perceptual discipline into the procedural architecture of land use and energy regulation. Project Spiro was named after our state's motto, Dum Spiro Spiro. While I breathe, I hope. Breath is not abstract. It's the most continuous form of our participation in the atmosphere that we share with every living being on the planet, from phytoplankton to trees. It connects us to the Tiger River's aquatic communities, to the Carolina Wren outside the fence line of the industrial park where the old Kohler plant AI data center is now being constructed, to the trees of the Piedmont watershed that filter the air before it reaches our lungs, to breath and to breathe is to be in relation. It is the most basic form of what Pope Francis calls communion with creation and what Haraway calls being in the contact zone. That building going up on South Pine Street here will process computational tasks for investment clients whose names and purposes are not and will never be publicly disclosed. The Tiger River will continue toward the Broad and the Congaree and eventually the Atlantic. Both things are happening simultaneously in the same county, under the same atmosphere. The question that attention as an ecological practice puts before us is this: what are we willing to see? The community that showed up to County Council in February and is staging another march here in May next month, that community briefly and collectively made the contact zone visible. And that visibility is what I mean by attention as an ecological practice, not as a substitute for structural transformation, but as a necessary condition for wanting it. Sure that we're excited. Crawford to Wainwright Mann. And finally, the image credits. Thank you so much for your attention and your participation in this ongoing project. And I appreciate you.